people who broke up with their fiancés, what made you go from wanting to spend the rest of your life with them to not wanting to be with them at all? The first girl I fell in love with was my world. We dated for 3 years, and everything seemed to be going great. So I popped the question, and she said yes. We were going to get married on the anniversary of the day we met. 3 weeks before the wedding, my best friend came to me and said we needed to talk. He just let it out and told me she had slept with nearly every friend I had and that she hung around the truck stop a lot. At first, I was in shock and disbelief, but he had no reason to lie. A couple of days later, the guys showed me pictures of her at the truck stop with a bunch of men. I completely lost it. The photos were from just a day or two earlier. Some even showed her giving guys blowy next to trucks. I called my parents and told them what was going on and that the wedding was off. Then I called her parents late that night and told them the wedding was off, but nothing else. The next morning, I was drinking coffee when she came up and started talking about how wonderful everything was, how great life was, and how excited she was to get married. While she rambled on about all the gifts we were getting, I went into the bedroom and grabbed the pictures. When I came back into the kitchen, she smiled and told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to her. I walked up to her, put my hand gently on her shoulder, and said, "Is that what you told yourself while giving them blowy?" Then I dropped the photos on the table. She froze and turned corpse white. She didn't say another word. She stood up and started to speak, and I said, "Do you really think there's anything you can say that will make this better?" She took off the engagement ring and handed it to me. I asked for my mom's necklace back. Then I gave her 2 hours to pack her things and leave. She did. She only took clothes. Everything else stayed. Story 2. She started selling her inners when we dated, and I was fine with that. Then she began selling used gym clothes. I was fine with that too. It's disgusting, but it worked for her. And she basically made more money than she spent on cheap inners. Then came the stupid requests for explicit pictures. We started to disagree there. A little later, she apparently started an OF and gained a decent following by promoting herself among some gamers. That was the end of our relationship. I might have been able to deal with it if she had talked to me, but doing it behind my back was heartbreaking. That was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Story 3. I met a girl at college. We were both seniors. We hit it off during the one class we had together, and she invited me to spend a week with her at the beach house her family rented every summer. We kept up a long-distance relationship for close to a year, and I proposed when she came to visit for Christmas that year. The biggest issue was that she wanted to spend all her time with me, despite living 1,500 miles away. I would call her on my way to work, on my way back from work, and then have hours-long FaceTime calls with her after dinner. This left me literally no time for anything else besides work, basic necessities, and her, except for my weekly visits to see my male best friend in the next town over. I eventually ended it. One Sunday, I had made plans to visit these friends that evening. This was a weekly thing. She knew about it and had even met these friends, saying she liked them. On my way home from work, I called her, and she asked if we could talk on FaceTime before I went to my friend's place. I agreed, and we talked for about an hour. Afterwards, I headed over. A few hours later, she called, livid, screaming and cussing me out. "I know you're cheating on me. Who is she? Why do you like her more than me?" The only female there was my best. Friend's wife. I even got my friend on the phone, but she still wouldn't listen. Convinced we were having an orgy instead of playing WoW and watching bad horror movies. I spent a good 30 minutes on the porch just listening while she screamed at me. I eventually hung up and silenced my phone for the night. I broke it off the next day. That insane lack of trust was a deal breaker. I wouldn't be able to do anything that she wasn't involved in. I later found a wife who trusts me when my job requires me to spend a night out of town and can find things to do herself when I want to spend time alone. Story 4. He was my best friend, and I really enjoyed our relationship. Honestly, I hold no bad feelings toward him. But he had a tendency to avoid communication when he was angry, sad, or upset. At first, it seemed like a minor problem I could adjust to, but the passive aggressiveness and silent treatment, sometimes lasting for days, started to wear on me. I felt like it was a form of control. He never accepted my apologies, never apologized himself, and would just wait it out until he was ready to talk again. Then he'd skip the fight entirely and act as if nothing had happened. Basically, no issue we ever had was ever actually addressed, and I became afraid to cause a confrontation because I knew it would go unresolved. It made me feel like I couldn't fully trust him, and the thought of doing that for life stopped being appealing. Story 5, she went through a terrible, truly terrible mental breakdown, which eventually led to a diagnosis. I did everything I could to help her hold herself together, but it wasn't enough. In the end, I told her I would stick it out. I would do my best to work with her, but she had to listen to her doctors. She had to follow all the advice she was given, take her medication, accept that she had a mental illness, and confront it. She didn't. So when she lost control for the umpteenth time and told me to leave and never come back, I took her at her word. Some people call me an a-hole for that choice, but I'm not going to subject myself to 50 years of abuse and misery for someone who won't do the first thing to take care of themselves. Story 6. When I found out he saw me merely as a way to get into the United States and as a meal ticket, I called off the wedding 9 days before it was supposed to happen. Best decision I ever made. More than a year later, he contacted me and attempted to blackmail me, unaware that I was by then working as a defense contractor with a security clearance. That meant I had to report the attempt to the FBI, which landed him and his relatives in the United States in serious trouble. Story 7. I caught him in 2 major lies as his mental health declined. He turned to alcohol and became verbally abusive. I told myself, the next time it happens, I'm out. And it did, at our friend's wedding in Florida. I'm from Canada. The wedding party saw the fallout from the fight, and a bridesmaid I had met an hour earlier told me he had cheated at the bachelor party months before. After seeing his abusive nature, she decided I needed to know the truth. The cherry on top? The day he cheated was the day I bought my wedding dress. I know I dodged a major bullet, but that's the thing about emotional abuse. It's insidious. Deep down, you know it's wrong, but you also doubt whether you're being a good partner or abandoning someone in need. I've moved on and am much, much happier. I wake up every day and am thankful it's over. I'm almost finished with my PhD as well, which is lovely. Story 8. He broke off the first engagement. We were very young, and he ended it because his friends didn't like me and convinced him to break up. We got back together a bit later and resumed the engagement like idiots, but with a new ring because that somehow made it better. 6 months later, I broke it off because it dawned on me. If he was willing to dump me because his buddies didn't like me, what would marriage or having children be like? My mom had once told me that love is when the money is tight and they turn the lights off. Will you feel strong enough to get through it with them? I ended it for good when I realized there was no way I saw him as the partner I wanted to face life with. When things got hard, he would be nothing but a child about it, and I would be alone. He got engaged and married sometime later, and exactly as I thought, it didn't last. They divorced, he remarried within a year, and divorced again in another 2 or 3. He was in love with the idea of being married, not with actual marriage. Not a crazy, dramatic story, but that's it. Story 9. He told me, "You wouldn't marry me if you knew who I really was, let alone like me." Somehow, I stayed. Cue a trip to a high cliff, where he said his cousin's fiancée had disappeared and fallen off another cliff after allegedly telling him it was over. Immediately after, he got me pregnant. On purpose, he had broken protection. And when I told him, he held me on the bed by my throat, choking me and demanding I be happy about it. Either he really wanted to freak me out, or he was a legitimate psychopath. Nevertheless, I was out like a trout in a drought. Story 10. He changed a lot after we were engaged, not pulling his weight financially or around the house. He put an offer on a house without even asking me, an hour away from where it made sense for us to live, my job, my family, etc., and I had never even seen the home before he made the offer. He told me he didn't want children ever for the first time in 3.5 years because if we divorced, he'd have to pay child support. His true colors came out in the last 3 months of our relationship for sure. Definitely dodged a huge bullet with that one. Story 11. I left my fiancé. I got engaged at 18 after 6 months of dating. He was 2 years older and claimed to be the mature one, but he couldn't hold down a job, lied every time he left one. And I paid for everything while he complained that our life was so expensive. He only paid for his hobbies. At that point, he was working somewhere I had arranged. Basically, he was a pathetic excuse for a person who wouldn't take responsibility for himself. And it took me growing up to realize what a complete crap show it truly was. Nothing too dramatic, just a clear lesson that it wasn't supposed to be like that. Story 12. After almost 10 years together, she was still using the silent treatment every single time things did not go her way. I decided things were over when I made one last attempt to get her to work with me on fixing things, telling her that I didn't feel good in this relationship. Instead of keeping the dialogue going, she got mad, started crying, and then did not talk to me for a month right before Christmas. We have 2 kids together. Have 2. Then, on Christmas Eve, she came, hugged me, and apologized, acting like nothing had happened. I told her we would talk after Christmas was over. The question mark on her face was really sad to see, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I want to offer my kids the best life possible. Raising them in such a toxic environment just is not going to do. Better with separated, happy parents than a miserable mom and dad together. Story 13. I was engaged to a woman I genuinely wanted to spend my life with. There was no doubt about it. I work out of town often, and she started acting differently. I came home early to try to figure out what was wrong and fix the issues. She then told me that she had cheated on me. It took me several days of thinking before I decided I had to break up with her. I was still going to be working out of town, and I wouldn't have had that trust anymore. It's been over a year, and I'm still not sure I made the right choice. Story 14. It quickly deteriorated. After I began to see that she was deeply narcissistic, and the relationship became even more toxic and emotionally abusive. I remember picking her up from the airport, and she spent the entire 30-minute drive home screaming at me because I couldn't fit the image of what she wanted me to be. That was the moment I realized I would be spending my life with someone who had the audacity to treat me with so little respect. At the time, I was too broken to fully see it, so I spent another 10 months there as it got worse. I got really sick. Everything from a bad sinus infection to strep throat to shingles, all at age 25. I was trying to build the emotional strength to leave, and thankfully she ended it not long after. I thought I could help her with how much I loved her, but she was too abusive for me to be able to. Story 15. He was the first person I truly fell in love with. He was an only dad, and I loved being a mom, loved being wanted and needed. I never thought I could fall in love or that anyone would love me. Then it became more controlling and emotionally abusive, and I started to feel used for my love of his son and my money. He cheated openly and told me no one would ever love me. When he told his son that the boy was the reason the fiancé and I were having problems, that broke something in me. I could deal with him hurting me, but damaging his son to hurt me was too much. A month after we separated, he was married to someone else. Story 16. He started calling me names, and when I told him he was being hurtful, he said what he was saying was the truth and that I was just oversensitive. He made my son cry. Then he started saying my son was rude and disrespectful and that everybody thought so. I asked around. Nobody thought so. He filed for bankruptcy because his mother told him it was the best thing to do, even when I begged him not to. He is a narcissist. I do not want that for me or my son. Bye. Story 17, I found out she was stealing bill money to fund her pill addiction. It was a rude awakening when the power guy came to shut off my electricity on my only day off. I had to scramble and pay the bill twice because she hadn't bothered to pay it with the money I gave her. I confronted her and got a plethora of excuses. Later, I noticed medicine was missing and we got into a fight about it. I remember just wanting to be alone, with some wine and a hot bath. I decided, enough, I'm out. I broke up with her right then and there. The next 2 weeks were hell, but I packed my things and moved. I ended up meeting an amazing woman who genuinely makes me happy. Sometimes it feels like we're meant to start over and meet someone new. Story 18. I was never his number one. He didn't contribute at an adult level. The spark had long gone out. I don't think he possesses the depth I need. We ended things mutually, and we actually still speak. I feel relief every day that we did not get married. To be fair, I never wanted to get married in the first place, but it was important to him. Also, I went into the relationship very honest about never wanting children. He started to change his mind. That's not something you compromise on. I don't think he has the capacity to be a good, thoughtful, and present father. But it's not my call. If he wants a child, he should have one with someone who also wants one. Story 19. He was still married. Not me, but a friend of mine. She met this guy and they immediately hit it off. She found out he had moved out of the city for a few years and decided to return home to settle down. Things were going great. We hung out. Everything was fine. He met her family, she met his. Until one day, she told us he proposed. Yes, with a ring and all, and it was just intimate. After that, he told my friend he would be going back to the other city to settle some things so he could come back home, here in our city. It took longer than expected, and she kept asking what. The reason was he finally confessed that what he was settling were his divorce papers. Dude literally had a wife and kid in another city and came back here as if he were a freaking bachelor. Yep, that ended it. Story 20. Not me, but my brother had this happen. His entire relationship with his then-girlfriend and fiancé lasted a whole 2 months, and I'm pretty sure they spent most of that just arguing. He proposed after less than a month of actual dating. Granted, he had been good friends with her throughout high school, and they were on and off for about a month or so until they finally broke up completely. It was pretty much an engagement doomed to fail from the start. Story 21. I was so desperate for someone to love me. I thought he loved me. I thought I loved him. I realized I was saying yes to things I didn't want to do, things that made me uncomfortable. I thought that if I didn't do everything he wanted, he would leave me. So I did all of them, no matter how uncomfortable they made me feel. I just wanted to be loved, and I didn't see that I wasn't being loved. I was being used. In the end, I realized I didn't have to say yes anymore. I could say no. There was no point in me being uncomfortable. He told me he was going to have a 3-way with other women, and that he didn't care if I was uncomfortable. That was the last straw. That was when it hit me. I didn't have to put up with his crap, so I ended things. I was being groomed, all because I thought he would leave me for someone else if I didn't do exactly what he wanted. And unfortunately, I was right. Story 22. It was a long-distance relationship. She was still studying, so she could not leave her country. The only way for us to be together was for me to quit my job, marry, move to her country, and be unemployed for at least a year, with no guarantee of finding a new job. The process of applying for a spouse visa there was slow and expensive. The relationship was already deteriorating because of the distance. At some point, I decided it wasn't worth the risk. It still makes me sad. We might have been a good couple under different circumstances. Story 23. We were high school sweethearts and decided to have a long engagement while attending different colleges. Since we were engaged, we started being intimate. Soon he felt entitled to have his hands on me constantly and expected me to drop everything to spend time with him, even when it interrupted classes or my job. He began being openly dismissive of my education, suggesting that I pick an easier program or drop out entirely so we could get married and live together. His family started talking about babies, and when I said, as I had since high school, that I didn't know if I wanted that, they looked at me like I was an alien. Finally, I confessed to my sister that I was thinking about going ahead and getting married, hoping he would stop wanting to be intimate with me in every possible moment and situation. She made me realize that I dreaded spending time with him. Story 24. I was with my ex-fiancé for 6 years. We got engaged in our 6th year together, and I realized I wasn't ready to get married, and I just didn't want to be married to him. I had changed who I was to be with him, and after a while, I just wasn't happy anymore. I wasn't myself and couldn't really be myself around him. When we got together, we both didn't want children, but as we grew older, he started wanting a family while I still didn't want any. I know that at some points I truly loved him, but by the end, I couldn't feel that magic anymore, no matter how much I cared. I left before it became an issue. I've never looked back, and I'm happier now. We no longer speak, but that's okay. Story 25. We got together for the 3rd time after knowing each other since we were kids. She lied about small things and wouldn't work or study. She refused to address her own mental health problems and let her bipolar disorder run her life. I stuck it out thinking I really loved her and tried to offer as much support as I could. It drained my mental health, working huge hours and never feeling like I was her first choice or truly important. We had a child together, and she wouldn't treat me as an equal parent. She became incredibly possessive of our daughter. While on holiday, she even suggested an open relationship after I tried to have a conversation about our love life, or lack thereof, and how we could work on things. The final straw was when she refused to go home for a couple of days to check on my mom, who had been beaten up and was in a bad state back home, and when I discovered she was doing drugs while breastfeeding our daughter while I was asleep. I could go on about all the mental and physical abuse I was subjected to, and even now she won't let me see our daughter. I regret breaking up with her the way I did and leaving my daughter in that situation. I'm focusing on building the best life I can and hopefully one day being able to hold our daughter in my arms again and give her everything I can. Story 26. We used to have adventures, but years passed where he only played video games, watched TV, and ate junk food. We had talks again and again. He stopped initiating intimacy. I realized that if I didn't initiate it, he would only do it once or twice a year. He began to have poor hygiene. I started doing things on my own, realizing he was holding me back. I hiked while he played video games, made my own healthy dinners. After a year, while I had become happier and more independent and he stayed the same, I broke up with him. It sucked, but I'm so much happier now. Story 27. I was given an ultimatum. Force my employer to take me off a career-boosting project or she'd leave. The project required me to be on a remote site for 10 days and back home for 4, and it was expected to last exactly 2 years. This was just 3 months in. I was immediately annoyed, but I thought long and hard about it. In the end, I decided I could never be with someone who would give me an ultimatum like that. We probably could have made it work, but it was a wake-up call to other problems in the relationship that I had ignored. I was just done. I have always hoped for nothing but the best for her. Story 28. She cheated on me with 5 other men, using the same manipulative tactics she had described using on others. She gaslit me constantly. I was always the bad guy. She would insult me and then slap me, and somehow I was the one apologizing. She hit me a few times, neglected me for a while, and then sold my engagement ring to buy her last husband's, lying about what were obviously wedding gifts. She had all of our friends lie to me about her previous relationship, as she had been sleeping with him months before we officially broke up. The plan had been to take one last trip to see me, break up with me, and then immediately go see him. She would pick something to be mad about, tear me apart verbally, hit me multiple times that week, and then quietly leave. We officially broke up several days later. Story 29. So, this is a doozy. One, even though I was bringing in almost the same amount of money through my disability checks, the money doesn't count because you didn't work for it. Two, after being together about 8 years, doing all the cooking, most of the cleaning, and all our errands, suddenly nothing I did was enough or good enough. I am dyslexic and made mistakes 3 times on recipes in 6 months. And suddenly, I don't know how to cook. 3, he got me a cat for my birthday, then 2 months later wanted to get rid of it. 4, he was upset that we weren't being intimate. Gee, I wonder why. And tried to schedule it, like literally on the calendar. Then he got mad when it didn't work, expecting me to just crawl into bed and let him get off with no effort on my part. The final straw. My best friend went into hospice dying of cancer and wanted to will me her car. Of course, I said yes. He threw an absolute tantrum. How dare I let my best friend leave me something that would make our lives easier? He let slip that he was upset because the car would be free and clear in my name. Get screwed, Jason. Story 30. His dad. Let me explain. There were many red flags along the way that on their own should have been enough to send me running, but I was young and naive. Lying, cheating, spending our wedding funds. The usual stuff. One day his dad and I were alone and he asked me if I knew who I was marrying. Confused, I asked him to clarify. He made me ask my ex, who kind of admitted to some shady stuff in the past. I say kind of because once he found out his dad had told me, he completely lost it. Anyway, I stayed like an idiot and didn't call it off until 3 months before the wedding. He thanked me by flying to Vegas the next day. Winner. Story 31. First relationship. My high school sweetheart. We had kids young, 2 kids under 2 before I was 19. 6 years into our relationship, she went out with her girlfriends and came home with her undies inside out. Second relationship. She went to visit her mom in another city overnight. She came home and we started banging. I pulled the tip of a broken rubber, not mine, from her while we were doing it. I held it and went on with my business. When I was done, I said, "Hell yes, but at least the rubber didn't break." She broke down and admitted to cheating. I kicked her right the F out. Third relationship, I was sober, working on myself, and our relationship taught life. She was a bartender and would stay out 5 or 6 hours after her closing shift, while I was home with our 2-year-old, worrying and seething. One morning, while she was in the shower getting ready for work, she got a text from a guy saying how much fun he had with her in the club bathroom. Naturally, I threw her phone in the shower with her and told her she might want to answer him back. Story 32. Not quite meeting the usual criteria, but we were looking at wedding rings and had a plan to be married within the year. Long story short, my mental health deteriorated over the course of a year to the point where I began second-guessing a lot of my values, beliefs, and what I wanted in life. I was scared of not feeling fulfilled by the end of my life. She lost confidence in me, wanting to live the same life we had always talked about, and broke up with me. As I calm my mind down from my crisis, I'm starting to realize that my true values were the same all along, not what my crisis was making me think. She's dating someone else now, and it feels like I went through all of that sacrifice for nothing. Story 33. After the engagement, I discovered that the woman I had spent the last 3 years of my life with changed like a switch. Suddenly the nastiest, most demanding, repulsive human I had ever met. The wedding was supposed to be 3 months after our engagement. I bailed after just under 6 weeks. What was scary was how emotionally upset I was about this, yet she showed almost no reaction. No tears, nothing. Just an, "Oh, okay," put her stuff in a bag, said goodbye, and closed the door. A week later, I saw on Facebook that she was dating another guy and married him shortly after. Story 34. His terminally ill mother, who we lived with, asked him if he would walk a block to the convenience store to get her a soda because she wasn't able to keep anything else down. He flipped out on her, got in her face, cussed her out, and made her sob. I realized that this was the kind of future I was facing. So I went to the store, picked up her soda, then came home and told him I was going to the library. I went twice a week. I packed up my important things in my backpack and disappeared. I called my family and told them I was safe, instructing them not to tell him anything. I contacted him a few weeks later and retrieved all my stuff. Deep down, I think I always knew it was an abusive relationship, but that moment made it fully sink in. Story 35. We realized that issues with communication and intimacy weren't going to be fixed. The love we had for each other made us endure a lot of dysfunction, and in my case, it made me ignore many red flags. There were just enough good days and moments of attraction that it felt like we should stay together and figure out our issues. But ultimately it broke down, and we had no choice but to end it. I regret every day that we couldn't figure things out. The lesson I've learned is that my emotional needs are just as important as those of the people I love. Story 36. We dated for 3 years, and he was very close to my family. After he proposed, we chose to start premarital counseling since we were responsible adults in our 30s at this point who had both been in failed marriages and didn't want to go through that again. In the second session, he told the counselor he wouldn't marry me until his children were out of school. At that point, they were 10 and 12. That was the first time I'd heard that, and it threw me for a loop. Fast forward 2 weeks, and he asked me to meet with a female relative, not his mother, but considered the matriarch of the very large family. She literally grilled me for 2 hours about our relationship, how I would handle his children, my future job prospects. I was working full-time, so I had no idea why she was concerned, and how my child would blend into their family. Remember, we had been together for 3 years. I'd been around these people countless times. My child had spent time with them, and we did things together regularly. I wasn't some fly-by-night person. His family knew my family very well and considered each other friends. I got home that night and stayed up well past midnight considering all of this. I decided, nope, I'm not putting myself or my child through that ever again. I knew in my gut this checkup would be expected regularly. I also had no desire to wait another 8 to 10 years to get married. He wasn't budging, so I broke it off and never looked back. I do not regret it, even though the fallout was terrible in the long run, thanks to a rebound, but that's another story. I know it was the absolute best decision for myself and my child. Story 37. Honestly, I hadn't been feeling right in the relationship for the past 6 years. Burnout, stress from work, death and illness in the family, lack of intimacy, and the feeling that we were more living next to each other than with each other all added up. We kept trying to work on it, but we almost broke up 3 times in the last 2 years, only to convince ourselves we'd work on it. At some point, I realized we had grown apart and probably had very different views on many things. So I ended it. He called it a waste to throw away 14 years, and the first few days afterward were painful. But now we sort of live together amicably, at least until I find another place. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a situation that felt wrong. Story 38. Not engaged, but we had been dating for 3 years, and the relationship was heading that way. On paper, he was great, a doctor, hardworking, and adored me. However, the reality was different. He was a workaholic and a poor communicator. If things weren't all puppies and roses, he didn't want to talk about it. That's fine while dating, but I came to realize a couple of things. 1, his job would always be his first wife, not me. I didn't want to run someone else's day-to-day life, which is what partners of workaholics often do. I wanted a partner in life, not a meal ticket. 2, marriages go through ups and downs. If we couldn't communicate while dating, it wouldn't get better. After marriage, or once we had children. So I broke it off. I think I kind of blindsided him. It was not a good breakup. He went out and bought a new sports car about 3 months later. So I'm pretty sure that was the engagement ring money he had set aside. I ended up meeting someone else about a year later. We were married 2 years after that and have been happily married for 16 years. He married a year after we broke up. Honestly, I think he just really wanted to be married. He is now divorced with 2 teenagers and still a workaholic. We have mutual friends, so I hear updates regularly. Story 39. He is white, I'm Mexican. He admitted that he grew up around racist ideology and didn't know better until he joined the military, where, of course, he met people of many different races. He was friends with people from many backgrounds, so I assumed he had truly outgrown the racist beliefs he was taught as a child. He has a child from a previous relationship, the mother of. His child is also Mexican, though their child looks white, blue eyes and blonde hair like him. I can't remember how we got on the subject, but during a conversation, he said he was glad his son looked like him and not his mother. I said something like, "Oh, it will be cute to see him speak Spanish when he's older, since not many people will expect him to know it." He said, "Oh no, he's not learning that trash. How am I going to speak to him?" The conversation then devolved into him degrading Mexicans. That was when I realized he had never really outgrown the beliefs he was exposed to as a child. I didn't want to be stuck with that for another minute, let alone the rest of my life. Story 40. Paid on Friday and broke by Monday. Frequently, his car payment was up to 2 months past due, insurance lapsed, and he neglected maintenance on his vehicles, which caused issues during the annual safety inspection. I had to catch him early on payday, or it was like pulling teeth, to get his portion of the household bills. And this was a man who made almost $100,000 annually. He had convinced me that his financial problems were because he co-signed on a car his son stopped paying for, which the finance company repossessed and then sued him for the balance. Plus, he was paying child support for his 16-year-old. No big deal. We were in this together. It finally dawned on me that he was a horrific gambler. I had been clueless, and he hit it well. My eyes opened the morning he threw a full-on ranting, raving temper tantrum because we were running late and I wouldn't stop for lottery tickets on our commute to work. We worked at the same place and often drove my car in case we needed the easy pass. Later, I laughed thinking about it. Nope, it was probably mainly for my gas. His tank was typically running on fumes. The pieces fell into place. Always broke, only wanting to go to Atlantic City or Charlestown, West Virginia for weekend trips, coming home late on paydays with an attitude, and so on. I realized that being with this man could cost me my house, my health, and my sanity. He would have dragged me down with him. I told him I refused to be a retired woman, forced to work a part-time job at Walmart just to keep a roof over my head and food in my belly. If I work part-time, it will be because I want to. I gave him back his ring and kicked him and his mother out. Yes, I had allowed his mother to move in too. Kicking them out of my house was one of the best days of my life. Story 41. He became more of a jerk as the relationship went on. Cruel, unfair, and distant. Then he caught feelings for a woman in another country. I ended it, and now I'm in love with a woman. We move into our new place very soon. We were together for 3.5 years, engaged for 18 months, but things hadn't been great for about a year before I ended it. He talked to me less, didn't open up, made jokes that made me uncomfortable and told me, "You're so sensitive, you need a thicker skin." He blamed my sensitivity on the fact that I'd been too ill to attend school from ages 10 to 18. As if making borderline racist jokes would have been more acceptable to me if I'd gone to high school like him. After finishing his training, his predominantly male work environment influenced him, and he brought home things I couldn't get my head around. His jokes and comments went from bad taste to cruel, leaving me sad, hurt, and crying on the other side of the bed while he texted his mates, completely ignoring me. One night, a small argument opened my eyes. It was one of the first times I realized I wasn't happy. His neighbors had 2 huskies left in a small garden all day. I said it wasn't fair to the dogs. They should be running miles each day. He argued that huskies are cute and he wanted one. The conversation escalated. Now, we had always talked about having kids, and I have potential fertility issues, so this was sensitive. I also have a chronic disability where high-pitched, loud sounds can be physically overwhelming. A dog barking next to me can cause real pain. Me. I can't stand the amount of noise they make. Him. I don't know how you'll ever handle a baby if you can't manage a puppy. Written down, it doesn't sound so bad, but it hurt. He shut down and wouldn't talk to me about why his comment upset me. Instead, he went back to texting his new friend in America late into the night about cars, tires, and whatever else. A few months later, he announced he had feelings for this other woman, but didn't know what to do about us. I wish I had been stronger then. I'd been in therapy for several years, but being angry and doing something that might upset someone, like breaking up, was incredibly hard. He strung me along for a month, ing and ah-ing about what to do, ruined my birthday plans, got angry every day, and made me cry, as if it were somehow my fault that he had feelings for someone else. Finally, I made a decision. I broke it off on the phone, and the weight lifted off my shoulders. I could breathe again. 2 weeks later, he collected his things and asked if we would still be together had he not been talking to this other woman. I said absolutely not. Him catching feelings for a woman 4,000 miles away whom he'd never met and sending her money for car parts was the final straw. That was nearly 4 years ago. Therapy helped me see it wasn't just his fault. We hadn't been compatible for quite some time, and I needed more than he could give. I had just been too scared to do anything about it. Also, I'm a lesbian now, and very happy with my girlfriend. We're moving into our new place together in the next few weeks as soon as the builders finish the kitchen. Story 42. I realized I wasn't attracted to him anymore. It took years of denial. I thought I might be asexual or that past traumas made being intimate difficult. Turns out I'm not asexual. I just didn't like my partner. He grew facial hair that didn't suit him, gained some weight, changed hairstyles, and overall hardly looked like the guy I had fallen for. None of those things are inherently bad. People change. But the attempts at wooing me had vanished over years of complacency. His changes, combined with my lack of interest, were the final straw. I realized it was a terrible mistake when I found myself happier around everyone else and not him. And when I came to terms with dreading intimacy, not because I disliked it, but because it was him. I don't fault him at all. People drift apart and change. I just hope he appreciates that it ended before marriage was involved. Story 43. She called me defective because I didn't have parents. I'm from India, where most marriages are arranged, so I met a girl through mutual interest. We spent months talking, and my guardian and her. Parents even met each other. Everything was going well, and we were planning our engagement and marriage. One day, during a casual conversation about what options we had before meeting, she suddenly said, "You have the defect?" I thought maybe she was talking about my looks. When I pressed her, she clarified that the defect was that I didn't have parents, unlike other options. I immediately called the whole thing off. No one had ever said anything like that to me, and it completely threw me off. Turns out it was the best decision ever. She's married now, and she later tried to meet me when she was in my city for work, wanting a casual talk at her hotel. Story 44. Not a fiancé, but definitely with plans to go further. She decided she didn't want to go to school or get a job. I think being a housewife is better suited for me, or I just want to be a homemaker and have kids. She also wanted a lot of material things. Wigs, nails, particular clothes. She was not only looking to leech off of us, roommate, us, best friend, later husband, but also planning to cheat. I found out she was messing around with many people and decided I would go through with my plans, just without her. I don't regret leaving the way I did. Story 45. She argued with virtually everyone in her life and always saw herself as the victim. During our 1.5 years together, she changed jobs 4 times, which in retrospect was because she never got along with her colleagues. She would complain to me about them constantly, rat them out to her supervisor for any reason, and it was always their fault, never hers. She told me stories of long-term close friends who eventually ghosted her. Again, always their fault. She was always losing friends and making new ones, only to lose those too. She didn't get along with the vast majority of her family, going so far as to throw a temper tantrum at her dad's house, smashing things, breaking windows, and saying some really, really nasty things to her brother. She showed me the texts and emails she sent him, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. The kind of stuff that would make you never speak to a sibling again. But of course, it was his fault. Every once in a while, she would put the crosshairs on me and start a fight out of nowhere, almost like it was my turn to feel the wrath. If you're reading this, Catherine, get your crap together. Story 46. We just wanted different things in life. I wanted stability, a house, a family. She wanted to chase her dream job coast to coast, even if it meant quitting our jobs with no backups or real plans. She ended up resenting me because I wouldn't quit my job, sell my condo, and leave my family and friends to try to eke out an existence in New York so she could do an unpaid internship at the company she wanted to work for. We were in our early 30s. This is not the time of your life to consider unpaid internships. Story 47. At first, he wasn't putting effort into our relationship. I handled all the date plans, trip plans, made sure our apartment was stocked, paid for Wi-Fi and energy while waiting for him to make time for me. I always felt like I was on the back burner for his writing and sometimes his D&D games. I told him about these issues and he said he would work on them. Come to find out, he told his best friend that things aren't actually how I see them, and it's just me, PMSing. On top of this, he also received explicit pictures from another woman, flirted with multiple girls, and tried to contact an old booty call who did not respond. He did these things during the first 2 years of our 4-year relationship. He also talked about me like I was a chore, saying, my girlfriend guilted me into hanging out with her. I just wanted to know why it was so hard for him to consider me and make time for me in his life. I realized I didn't want to feel like a roommate, a chore, and a second option for the rest of my life. He did start to change, but it took me being diagnosed with cancer and discovering he had cheated on me for him to actually change. I deserve someone who wants to hang out with me without needing me to get cancer for them to realize it. Story 48. I broke it off after only a couple of months or so. A number of people really close to me got pregnant, all around the same time, and that set off the dominoes for me. I really did not want kids and suddenly was totally unable to be intimate with my SO out of paranoia and anxiety. It quickly progressed to not even wanting any level of physicality with them. I was also finishing an extremely grueling post-secondary program and about to graduate. That final push demanded a lot of my focus and added considerable stress to my life. Amidst all this, I distanced myself from my SO, which gave me perspective about how this was just not the person I wanted in my life long-term. I adored his family and they loved me, but I simply couldn't be with him. I didn't mourn losing my SO. I mourned losing a close relationship with his family. His dad still keeps in touch with me as I was his dad's favorite. This wasn't the only person to propose or come close to proposing, had a ring and all, and I got good at saying no. I had a lot going on, mainly dealing with my NPD mother, but I also deeply valued my independence and the life I was building, and I wasn't ready to share that with anyone. When I finally met the right person, it was immediately clear it was a great fit. He caused me to break so many rules I had set for myself in relationships, silly dating rules I had for structure and control, including no proposal under a year of dating. I never once doubted that I had made the right decision. Story 49. For one thing, he didn't want to be officially engaged, as then people would expect us to immediately get married. He wanted the engagement to be unofficial. He suggested buying a ring, but the one I liked was 130 pounds. Even though he earned twice my salary and I was willing to spend the same amount on a gift for him, that was too much for him to spend. So we never got a ring. He wasn't short on money, just mean. I paid my own way, even having to dip into my savings because our expenses were tailored more to his salary than mine. But that wasn't why I broke up with him. I broke up with him because his inconsiderate behavior was upsetting me more and more. I was crying multiple times a week. I tried to talk it through with him, telling him I was unhappy, why, that I was thinking about leaving, and then that I would leave if he didn't change. Eventually, he literally told me he didn't think he could consider my feelings. It wasn't possible for him. So I left him, and he was surprised. Story 50. When she asked me, "You don't mind that I hang out with other guys when you're not there?" I told her she's an adult, and that I trust and love her. When I asked her to get a job to pay her half of the bills for the place she wanted to move into with me, she said, "I'm trying, but everyone I'm interviewing with is an a-hole." When she got upset and said, "I don't want to spend the rest of my life with," she wouldn't finish her sentence despite my prompting. I finally acknowledged a couple of red flags. I had previously ignored when close friends told me she was cheating. She had been. I had also ignored that her mother had been married 4 times and her father 7 times. They were separated when we met and married to or dating other people. I do not believe in or desire to practice divorce. I am not a smart man. Story 51. We had to postpone the wedding by a few months because I had just come back from overseas and hadn't been able to finish planning as quickly as I thought. We even agreed on a new date. 2 days later, I discovered a long history of texts between him and his best gal. Friend, a childhood friend who was going to be his best woman, a married woman with a 4-year-old. When confronted, he said it wasn't his fault. Apparently, he interpreted, "Let's change the wedding date to X instead," as, "Let's break up and never see each other again." While we were living together, he texted her while lying next to me in bed while I was asleep. Story 52. I was talking to her about a family that died in a car crash. Mother, father, and little daughter. I was saying it was especially tragic because the little girl was involved. She asked me if the daughter died. I said yes. I asked why, and she told me, "It is good because nobody would care about the little girl." I asked if she was crazy, and she said, "If it was my child, I'd prefer for them to die. I wouldn't trust a stranger, and nobody cares about the child of others." It wasn't immediate, but I knew I wouldn't want a relationship with this person. A child, or even a pet. Rat was out of the question. Narcissistic, and the world revolves around her. It shocked me how long it took to realize. Story 53. I caught him in 2 major lies as his mental health declined. He turned to alcohol and became verbally abusive. I told myself, the next time it happens, I'm out. And it did. At our friend's wedding in Florida, I'm from Canada, the wedding party saw the fallout from the fight, and a bridesmaid I met an hour earlier told me he cheated at the bachelor party months earlier. After seeing his abusive nature, she decided I needed to know the truth. The cherry on top was that the day he cheated was the day I bought my wedding dress. I know I dodged a major bullet, but that's the thing about emotional abuse. It's insidious. Deep down, you know it's wrong, but you also doubt whether you're being a good partner or abandoning someone in need. I've moved on and am much, much happier. I wake up every day and am thankful it's over. I'm almost done with my PhD as well, so that's lovely. Story 54. Not my fiancé, but really close. He keeps losing me money. I had asked him to send me a package. He lost the receipt, and the package never arrived. $100 for mail, $200 worth of stuff. We're about to start a foreign vacation, and he delayed applying for a visa. We're splitting the costs, but now both of us have to pay more because his visa was delayed, and we didn't want to risk booking hotels and other things in case the visa never arrived. I must mention that he's neurodivergent, but honestly, money is the only thing that keeps me free from family and their cumbersome expectations. I simply can't keep losing money like this. I'm so torn. Story 55. I went to boot camp and she went partying and sleeping with other people. That was a long time ago. We've both done a lot of growing up since then. We had a lot of trauma and mental health needs that were unaddressed at the time. We're cordial with each other now. When my wife and I go back to that state, we usually stop by her place or go out to dinner with her boyfriend, and their kids. Hell, I was almost the best man at one of her weddings before they broke it off. She was very close to my family and maintained that relationship while I was away. Real life and its relationships are a lot more complex and complicated than a Reddit post. Story 56. First of all, he was a white rapper, a bad one. Second, he was a serial cheater. Also, he had a God complex. He was never wrong ever. It was always your fault. At first, the God complex made him seem, oh, so alluring and confident. He was tall, blonde, blue-eyed, packing. Sometimes I think guys who are packing honestly do not know how to act. His friends were semi-jealous. He had money, well, his parents, multiple cars, street bikes, dirt bikes, lavish vacations, and gifts. After we broke up, I found out his friends weren't jealous and bitter per se. They were thoroughly annoyed by his entire personality. He spiraled into a meth addiction with all the money Daddy threw at him. I ran, never looked back. Story 57. I told him I wanted to wait for marriage. He said yes. He met my parents and asked for my hand. Dad reluctantly said yes. He had a bad feeling. He met my whole family and made an excellent impression. He was the first person I introduced to my parents. In our culture, you only introduce your partner when you're absolutely certain you want to marry them. Since that moment, he thought I was trapped. He tried very hard to pressure me to be intimate. One time he was so forceful I lashed out. He then said it was because he loved me too much and lost control, and I stupidly felt guilty and took him back. Would talk down to me, accuse me of cheating, and track me. He criticized everything I did and became abusive in so many ways. He was stunned when I dumped him. My dad never knew what he did to me but was very happy. Story 58. Not a fiancé, but my marriage fell apart for multiple reasons. 1. He was physically abusive. 2. Mentally abusive. 3. He cheated. 4. He alienated me from my family and friends. 5. I couldn't even go outside. 6. When I started to develop mental illnesses due to everything I'd been through my whole life plus what he was putting me through. He told me he couldn't take care of someone like me. So I left. It's been years and I'm still trying to pull myself together to get my divorce. But fear is one hell of a thing to fight. I wouldn't ever go back, but I'm too scared to even be in the same room as him. Story 59. He quit putting effort into the relationship. I called him on it. He admitted it and said he would do better. He didn't. He also refused to work on things to better himself. He was afraid to drive. I tried to teach him. He was so bad I was afraid he would wreck my car, but also expected me to drive him instead of getting a bike using the bus, Uber, etc. I started to feel more like his mother than his partner and began literally viewing him as a teenager instead of an adult. He was 29 and was no longer attracted to him. He started pushing for setting a date and planning the wedding, and I broke up with him. Story 60. We talked about starting a family together, the normal stuff, after being together for 7+ years. He goes to America and makes a friend there, and the guy starts telling him the grass is greener on the other side. Fast forward, he starts thinking everything here is terrible. Pay, work, etc., all while expecting me to get pregnant. He then decides that life here is unbearable and wants to move to the USA because his friend said he'd give him a place to stay. During all of this, he's still saying he loves me and wants to be with me and have a family, just can't stand living here anymore. So I decided I wasn't going to fight him on it because obviously he doesn't want a future with me if he's willing to risk it to move there. Story 61. We started dating when I was in high school and he was my first everything and all I ever knew. It took me years to realize how controlling and abusive he actually was. It took a truly life-threatening altercation where a gun was involved for me to fully see how bad my situation was. I ended up packing up and moving out in the middle of the night when he was gone. Story 62. Misunderstanding. You know that totally unrealistic thing that happens in movies where the misunderstanding could have been resolved with a simple conversation? She had taken a trip back to her hometown, and I got worked up about how she was acting during a phone call. I decided she had met someone there and was going to break things off. I chose to be proactive and make the break myself. No asking about her plans. No conversation about what I thought was going on. Just rip the Band-Aid off and get through it. When I told her, she broke down. In tears, gave the ring back, and left. We never spoke again. I felt terrible but knew it was coming anyway and just got on with my life. I still thought about her every day though. I was talking to her mom about 10 years later and found out I was wrong. She had just finished college and then went back to her old hometown after that. No new boyfriend. I'm just the a-hole who broke her heart and lost an amazing woman. Story 63. A couple of months into the engagement, at the beginning of December, my roommates finally spoke up and pointed out all the red flags my then-fiancé had been showing throughout the relationship. They helped me see how controlling and manipulative she was. I sat and talked with her about it, but she just brushed it off, saying she couldn't change herself and wouldn't try because she has BPD. For the next week, I detested being around her or being on a call with her. The night before I called it off, we got in a pretty bad fight that led to us not talking the next day. I finally broke up with her because I had enough. Eventually, I also realized that having your partner threaten to kill you and point a knife at you is not normal at all. Story 64. A couple of months into the engagement, at the beginning of December, my roommates finally spoke up and pointed out all the red flags my then-fiancé had been showing throughout the relationship. They helped me see how controlling and manipulative she was. I sat and talked with her about it, but she just brushed it off, saying she couldn't change herself and wouldn't try because she has BPD. For the next week, I detested being around her or being on a call with her. The night before I called it off, we got in a pretty bad fight that led to us not talking the next day. I finally broke up with her because I had had enough. Eventually, I also realized that having your partner threaten to kill you and to point a knife at you is not normal at all. Story 65, I dated a girl for 3 years. I dated a girl and knew she had issues, but she was classically beautiful. I didn't think with my head. I ignored the red flags. She would tell me about her history and how she was staying loyal to me because of how much she loved me, as if staying loyal should ever be a struggle. I kept pressing on. We would fight sometimes, but it would always resolve. Then, one time we had a minor fight. We weren't engaged, but I thought we would be soon. And she broke up with me. Then, she ghosted me. I found out she had so many urges to go out and sleep around that she had to break up with me to fulfill them. I was gutted and ruined. I don't think I've ever been quite the same since, or will ever have the capability of loving someone as deeply as that ever again. I ended up dating someone new a few years later, getting engaged and getting married. We love each other, but not in the mentally unhealthy, codependent, you die if you lose each other kind of way. I think it's healthier to be comfortable with yourself and in love with your partner, but not so vulnerable or precarious that if they went away, you totally lose yourself. I lost myself once due to loving too deeply, and despite the highs of love, the lows have made me decide to avert that intensity for the rest of my life. Story 66. I was forcing myself to believe I was happy. I proposed far too quickly and thought I could stick it out, that things would get better over time, but my feelings never changed and resentment grew full over time. We had a big fight, and she made a comment about my recently deceased father that somehow snapped me into reality. I realized I had been wasting the last 5 years. I met someone a few weeks after the divorce, and the way I feel about her is something I never felt about my wife. It's crazy to think about how much I wasn't thinking and how much I was blocking out. I'm so much happier now, and I wish I would have done it sooner. Story 67. Honestly, we weren't a good fit. I'm sociable. She wasn't. She seemed to have no interest in chasing an actual career and regularly ignored my concerns about money. For example, I wanted an apartment that was cheaper and within my means, while she wanted a more expensive place because it had more amenities. At one point, she went back to school, and I begged her not to quit her part-time job. When I went to school, I worked 40 hours a week plus classes because we couldn't afford it otherwise without destroying my savings. Not our savings, since she had already burned through hers during a year out of work. This caused me to emotionally shut down due to the near constant panic about money. And then, while I was supporting her through school, she cheated on me. We tried to recover, but never fully did, even after she fixed most of the problems that had caused issues between us. I sat down with a therapist and realized I was incapable of getting over it. I was going to die unhappy at that rate, and maybe it was time to split. We tried couples counseling. She did a good job with it. I didn't. I just wasn't interested anymore. The trust was gone. Time to go. Story 68. She had mental health issues that she hid at the beginning of our relationship, which only got worse over time. She became increasingly abusive, both physically and emotionally. She had never lived anywhere on her own. Her mother was a huge factor in her issues and made a point to interfere in our relationship or any progress toward getting a place of our own. Eventually, she started threatening to kill herself if my ex spent the night at my place, and even invited her dad to our engagement party without telling us. She had never really known her dad, as he abandoned them when she was a baby, but what really did our relationship in were her jealousy issues. She would obsessively ask me about my past, and I answered honestly, thinking anyone who met me at 34 would understand that there were other women before her. Instead, she convinced herself that I wanted to sleep with anyone younger and blonder than her, because I had very briefly dated a couple girls like that before her. The final straw was when I went out with a bunch of coworkers after our shift, one of whom happened to be an attractive young blonde. Mind you, she was not my type, and I was about to turn 38. I wouldn't have had any interest in dating a 23-year-old even if I were single. That was the point I realized her insecurity would never go away, no matter how loyal I was, what I said, or how much I tried to reassure her. This would have been part of my life as long as I was with her, and I decided it was better not to get married in the first place. Story 69. You know that feeling when people think, if we get married, that will fix everything? I got to that point. That's what I was doing until I woke up one day and thought, man, I want a divorce already. If you want to know the point where the relationship started going downhill, it was after the honeymoon period. The relationship began to feel like I was walking on eggshells. If I wasn't 100% on target every day, we'd get into a fight immediately. And because I have poor relationship boundaries in general, the line between me and who she wanted me to be got pushed to the edge. I try to be friendly with my exes. If any of them needed help, I would try to provide it because I never thought my exes were bad people. Her, though, I want nothing to do with her ever again. Story 70. I finally woke up to all the narcissistic crap she put me through over the course of 3 years. The last straw should have been when I planned a surprise visit to see her in Indiana over 4th of July weekend. Her mom and cousin planned everything for me. It started out great, but toward the end, she left the house for a bit and got pissed at me because the day before I had lied about coming out there and she wanted me to leave. She also had a nervous breakdown, but later on, once I left, one of her ex-friends told me it was because she was talking to at least 3 other guys and was trying to hide her guilt. There was just so much of that same crap. How I was such an awful person whenever my anxiety and depression got the best of me. Yet she cheated on me more than once, was always hyping up other dudes online who weren't me, and only ever wanted to work on our relationship when she knew damn well I was going to pack up and move back to LA, knowing I was her meal ticket. Now, a few months later, I'm finally in a better spot mentally and physically, while she's lost about 90% of her friends because of our relationship, among other things she did to them. Her family knows full well how committed I was, even with all the drama, and that it was 100% her fault for everything. Story 71. We were together for 5 years. I supported her financially and mentally helped her escape her home, where her mother would use her as free childcare for her younger sister, while the mother went out and got drunk every other night and would take her money and spend it on cigarettes and alcohol. I allowed her to live with me while she studied and didn't ask her to work because she was pursuing a double degree that was very time-consuming. 4 years into our relationship and 2 years into our engagement, she admitted to an affair with an old flame from high school. I had my suspicions, as her stories constantly changed after the fact, small but significant details, like one telling of the story she'd be with friend X, but another time, it was friend Y. She also began constantly changing her phone password, to the point she even forgot it once. Overall suspicious behavior. She came clean while I was away for work via text message, red flag, begging me to forgive her and promising it would never happen again. She made the effort of showing me she blocked him, deleted his number, and messaged him saying it could not continue. For a while, this stuck, but 4 months later, the behavior started up again, finally culminating on our 5-year anniversary when the flame added me on Facebook and she came up as a mutual friend, even though she had supposedly blocked him. She made all manner of excuses. I told her I was going to stay with my parents and not to be there when I came back, and she wasn't. She made all manner of attempts after that to get me back and apologize, but it always involved gaslighting and blaming me for the affair. While I don't think I was perfect, I firmly believe that if you're unhappy, leave. Cheating is never the answer. I have happily moved on many years later, now with a wonderful woman, and it's going on 4 years this year. Story 72. She, 24 at the time, had fallen in love with a 14-year-old boy. She claimed he was a past life prince lover. She also told me that, due to my mental health declining, she could no longer see any future with me. About 3 months prior, she had told me I was no longer allowed to see a therapist and had taken me off my mood stabilizers. Her excuse was, if I had any problems, they had to be solved between us and only us. Seeking professional help or perspective from friends and family is unhealthy and toxic. So, yeah, I ended up in the psych ward and moved out to live with my best friend, of 7 years instead. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.